I finally bought a tool to make nice videos with. Let's talk about S3 support in ShadowTraffic. ShadowTraffic can now write data directly to S3 buckets, and I'm going to show you how it works. On the right side of my screen, I have a text editor with a mostly blank ShadowTraffic configuration file, and on the left side of my screen, I have a terminal to actually run ShadowTraffic. And like I said, this file is basically blank, but I'm going to go ahead and run it anyway. ShadowTraffic runs with Docker, so all I do is say Docker run with my license keys and my AWS keys forwarded along with it. And you give it the configuration file that you want to run, which is this thing on the right. And then I'm going to give it some development flags to make it easy to figure out whether I'm generating the right data or not. So I'll generate 5 samples of data at a time, send it to standard out, forget about S3 for a minute, and I'm going to use the watch flag, which means whenever I save this file, go ahead and rerun ShadowTraffic interactively. So I'll run it, and ShadowTraffic is going to complain and say, hey, you're missing a bunch of key data for me to be able to generate this data for you. You don't have a bucket, you don't have any data, and you don't have any configs. Well, I'll go ahead and make all of those. I have an empty bucket called ShadowTraffic test data, which I'll go ahead and fill in for my first attribute. And I'm going to add also some configuration to say, how do I actually write that data out to the bucket? I have to say what the data format is, in this case, JSON-L, and then I have to give it a key prefix to say, what do those object names actually look like? In this case, I'm using the pretty standard convention of just having a part prefix, so it'll say part and then a timestamp. And the last thing I'll do is I'll generate some data. And just to show how this interactive mode works, I'm going to go ahead and have an empty map, which is basically no data, and I'll save the file, and on the left, you'll see ShadowTraffic go ahead and create 5 samples of that. In this case, there's nothing to generate, so it just gives me 5 empty maps. But you can see how the API works. I'm going to go ahead and start to fill in some of my data. I'm going to do, for this example, order data. So order IDs are UUIDs, and the usernames of the people who ordered it are just usernames. And so you can see 5 different examples of different UUIDs and 5 different usernames along with it. You can see as I start to add more structure to this JSON object that I don't actually have to do anything weird or different. I just start adding more of my object and I rip out concrete values and put in generators. So instead of an order number, I put in a sequential integer. Instead of whether it's a Boolean for whether it's backordered or not, I can do a weighted choice to say 95% of the time it's not backordered and 1% of the time it is. I'll go ahead and add just a little bit more structure so that these JSON objects are interesting to look at. And you can see cost. I do a normal distribution to be able to do statistical distribution, and same with discount percent. And all these things are available. And so as I look at this, I have now some interesting data to be able to play with. Now for the objective of this video, send it to S3. Well, I actually don't have to do very much. S3 is very easy because all you need to do is give it your keys. And so in this case, this is all the configuration that you need. So go ahead and I'll stop ShadowTraffic's Docker container, and I'm going to go ahead and take off the development flags. I don't want to watch it anymore. I don't want to send the data standard out, and I just want to send a continuous stream of data to this bucket. So if I look at the S3 bucket right now, as I said, it has nothing in it. And now I'll go ahead and I'll run this ShadowTraffic file. And what it will do is it will generate data and periodically write out objects to that bucket for me. So if I now look at the bucket, I should start to see the different part objects in it. And I can go ahead and I can look at it, and I'll grab this first one and say S3, copy it, ShadowTraffic, test data, send to standard out, and then pipe it into JQ. And what I should see is something that looks very similar to what I saw written to standard out. And indeed I do. I see different usernames, timestamps, order numbers, and so on and so forth. And ShadowTraffic will sit here and continue to just make these objects for me. That's pretty much all the configuration there is. If you want to control how quickly it's writing objects, there are knobs exposed to be able to control it both on a time basis and a batch element basis. You can say, for example, write a new object to S3 every 2 seconds or every 10,000 elements, whichever comes first. And this allows you to control the performance if that's important for you. But that's how S3 support works in ShadowTraffic. Thanks for watching.